Bibliophiles of the internet, my name is Adriana and today I'm here to bring you my May wrap-up. The theme for May was Make It Up May, which I thought was extremely clever of me because I could use this theme in two different ways. First, I could use it as a chance to make up some of those books I had planned in past TBRs and never got around to, or I could just read whatever I want and make it up as I go. Two birds, one stone, Anyways, that's enough self-congratulation. Let's just get into the books. The first book I finished in May, of course, was The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. Honestly, I'm not even in a place where I can talk about this book yet because it was such a roller coaster of a ride that wrecked me thoroughly and left me emotionally bereft. What's awesome about the Raven Cycle is that you can't even begin to predict what's gonna happen next. Like, you cannot anticipate anything that's gonna happen in this series. So I went into this one not knowing at all what to expect, but it just felt so right. There's this fundamental wrongness that's constantly present throughout this book, and that's totally the heart of the story because the characters' lives are just crumbling apart around them. Everything's falling apart. They're becoming off kilter and unbalanced. They're realizing that what they thought was control was just the illusion of control because they don't have a handle on the ley line, on any of these magical elements that are surrounding them. They can't change destiny or avoid it. So that's what they're grappling with, and that slip is acutely present in this story. What's happening around them and to them is so much bigger than them, and Maggie Stiefvater creates some unforgettable scenes to perfectly illustrate that. To put it plainly, this book has no effing chill. None at all. Ever, at any point. This final installment was so intense and that tension never let up, and I think that's what really struck me about it. And towards the end I was just like ugly weeping in my bed, bargaining with this book like, please don't do this, please not now, I'm not ready for this, don't do this to me, take anyone else, literally take anyone else, just don't do this. And like, it was just so difficult to read, but so gratifying as well. I mean, it definitely isn't perfect and it didn't deliver in all the ways that I wanted it to because I still felt like there were some key questions or moments that were kind of glossed over or didn't get enough attention, I felt, but that was really my only qualm with the story, and otherwise I just loved it. The point is, I gave The Raven King 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I finally finished reading The Search for Wanla by Toni de Terlizzi. This is a really neat middle grade sci-fi adventure story about a young girl named Ava 9 who's lived her entire life in this underground compound, training to live life on the surface of this planet, but when her home is abruptly destroyed and she's forced to seek shelter above ground, she realizes that this is nothing her training could have prepared her for. I've heard a lot of people describe the atmosphere of this trilogy as something reminiscent of Studio Ghibli or a Miyazaki film, and after reading it myself, I can definitely confirm that. It's highly imaginative, it has that element of wonder, and it's also fast-paced, extremely engaging, full of memorable characters and adventure, plus it has a lot of depth to it. One of the overarching themes or questions that this book asks that I really appreciated was, how do we approach difference? Do we see people or things who are different from us as a threat to us, as a danger to us, or do we see them as another way of life that should be explored, respected, or embraced? This book did a great job of grappling with that question, and it really resonated with me on that level. The only thing I didn't totally love was the villain and his treatment. I felt like he was definitely used as a plot device and he only popped up when something needed to happen, and I also feel like the way his story was handled in this first book wasn't completely satisfying to me, but that was really my only problem. But this was great. I can't wait to read book 2, and I gave this first book 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. This is queer lit, its own voices. It's about a trans girl named Amanda who had some trouble at her old school, so now she's moved to Tennessee to live with her dad, and she's going to a new school there, and she's just using this clean slate as a chance to just be who she is and live the life she's always wanted. This book is vital, it's important, it's so powerful, but what's so great about it is that it's all of those things while also just being an ordinary YA contemporary story. There are so many trans narratives out there, not all of them written by trans authors, that are so obsessed with the trans body or the transition process or what their life was like before. And what's great about this is that Amanda just wants to be a normal teenager, and by going to this new school and surrounding herself by new people who don't know her past, she's really getting that chance for the first time in her life. She wants to be involved at school, go to the football game, make friends, hang out at the local diner, go shopping, kiss boys, fall in love for the first time. All these things that heteronormative teenagers take for granted, she's finally getting to experience them. But what's really important is that Amanda's transness is not erased. It still definitely comes into play, and it still informs her perspective on the world. It still affects her on a day-to-day basis, and that's real life. It doesn't just go away because she has the ability to pass or because these people accept her as a normal girl, which she is. So even while she's experiencing these normal, maybe even cliche things, you still get to see the very real stuff that she's struggling with internally. And there are also these perfectly timed flashbacks that are poignant, kept to a minimum, just perfectly executed overall, and they just really give you a great sense of who this character is. But even though this story does play into a lot of YA contemporary cliches, and even though I wasn't completely invested in all of the relationships in Amanda's life, I feel like more importantly, this was an incredible story of self-discovery and self-love. Amanda is slowly realizing that she is worthy of love, she is worthy of good things in life, and she is deserving of all the wonderful things that life has to offer, and that is so important. So I just love this book. It's definitely one of the best trans narratives out there, and I very highly recommend it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I finally read The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. This is in its own way own voices because it's set in a fantastical version of Persia, I want to say, and it's also a retelling of 1001 Nights. This is about a kingdom ruled by Khalid, and every night he takes a new bride, but she is murdered by the dawn. The best friend of the main character, Shahrazad, is one of these wives who is taken and killed, and this enrages Shahrazad to the point where she volunteers to become Khalid's newest wife. But if it's up to her, he is not the one who's going to make it out of this marriage alive. What I love the most about this book definitely is the characters. Khalid and Shahrazad are two of my favorite characters I've read about in recent memory. I love women who really take to power, and Shahrazad becomes this incredible queen. She is a force within her own right. Shahrazad takes no nonsense from anyone. She is not playing. She does not let anyone mess with her, condescend to her, talk down to her, treat her badly. She is not here for your shit. But what I really love is that her relationship with Khalid really challenges and interrogates the whole bad boy trope, the whole falling in love with a bad boy and making excuses for him and being like, oh, but he really has a heart of gold. He's just done awful things. So the whole story really doesn't make excuses for Khalid, doesn't let him get away with anything, and neither does Shahrazad. Even as you gradually learn more about his backstory, it's not a license to just dismiss him as a good person who's just made some mistakes in life. It's a license to make you and Shahrazad hold him accountable. The whole story, like I said, is not about making excuses, but rather making amends. So thematically and character-wise, this was a really strong story, and I really connected to it. As I said, I was really drawn to Khalid and Shahrazad and their characters. I feel like eventually they kind of became like this awesome, badass feminist tag team, and you know I'm here for that all day, every day. So it was just a wonderful story. I didn't think it was perfect, and I talked more about some of the flaws in this story in my Goodreads review, which I will link down below, but I gave this first book 3.5 out of 5 stars. After that, I read Saga Volume 5 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. I don't really have too much to say about this volume. I loved it though. I felt like this volume got us back on track because I kind of felt like the series was waning a little bit at the end of Volume 4. Still very good, but just didn't have that X factor that I really came to appreciate about the series. But after I read Volume 5, I was like, ah yes, this is why I love Saga. we're back. So I just feel like the series came back better than ever in this volume, and something I do remember about this volume in particular was I loved the treatment of language. There are entire pages of panels in this volume that are written entirely in a fictional alien language, and there is no translation whatsoever. But because of the familiar syntax used in creating this language, and because of the powerful clarity of the art in every single panel, you lose nothing and you know exactly what's going on at all times. And that was a tiny detail that I really appreciated. So that was my ultimate takeaway from Saga Volume 5, I guess, but I loved it and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. This is queer lit and to the best of my knowledge also own voices. It's a mixture of speculative fiction and contemporary fiction about a Hispanic main character named Aaron Soto who is born and raised in the Bronx, and recently his father has committed suicide, so his family is coping with that. At the same time, in this reality, there's this procedure that allows people to suppress or essentially erase damaging or traumatizing memories so that they can better their lives, and Aaron is wondering whether he should get this procedure done or not, or whether they can even afford it in the first place. Plus, on top of all of that, Aaron is grappling with his sexuality, discovering his identity, realizing he's attracted to other boys, and he doesn't know how he should handle that. Let me just say that the absolute best part of this book for me was the queer Latinx representation. Like, yes, we can always use more, and this was great, I felt, in that respect. Aaron's narrative voice is a finely honed thing. It's distinctive, consistent, refreshing, realistic. It has a way of cutting straight to the heart of things, and I connected with it immediately. Another thing I really loved was how Adam Silvera was able to flesh out this atmosphere and this setting. It wasn't just a throwaway thing, which I really appreciated. He used strong imagery and strong scenes to really bring this place and this neighborhood and these people to life, and that was also something that was very familiar to me, so I felt like he did that intricate dynamic justice. Another really great thing about this story is that it definitely addresses different socioeconomic backgrounds. The thing about the Lateo procedure is that it costs money, and you know, not everyone has that kind of money. Aaron's family certainly comes from a more impoverished area, and they only have one parent now who's making a majority of the income. So whether they can even think about this procedure in the first place is a real question. That I felt was such a realistic portrayal of what it means in part to be a person of color, especially in America. You become intimately familiar with privilege and systematic gatekeeping, and you know better than most that sometimes your life is gonna boil down to a game of numbers, and if those numbers don't add up, then your access to certain things will be restricted, and sometimes those things are things that other people don't even have to think about. There were also some really intense plot twists throughout the story, which I could appreciate because I thought the story did a great job of lulling the reader into a false sense of security before going for the kill, so that was good. But at the same time, I had to ask myself, if these twists weren't in the story, would this book still be as memorable, as talked about, as lauded? And I feel like no. So in that way, the story felt a bit gimmicky at times, and another thing I didn't like was it felt like the ending sort of dropped off for no reason. Like the last third of the novel, I'd say, kind of felt like a throwaway, and after the last twist, it just kind of fizzled out. And so I didn't feel like it came to any kind of meaningful or lasting ending. So for those reasons and more, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And finally, the last book I read in May was Pax by Sarah Pennypacker. This is a middle grade story about a young boy named Peter who has raised a fox named Pax ever since Pax was a kit, but when Peter's father enlists in the war, he has to move in with his grandfather, and he's also forced to release Pax. The story is told in dual perspectives, both from Peter and Pax's points of view, and shortly after all of this happens, they're trying to find their way back to one another. Y'all, this story is like The Fox and the Hound, only more sad, which I didn't know was possible. I really didn't. And I mean that in the best way possible, because this book was amazing. But I really want to emphasize, like, if you plan to read this book, it is the saddest damn thing in the world. There is only sadness in store for you, only sadness down this road. There is nothing else, only sadness. The writing is amazing. Sarah Pennypacker really honed in on both Peter and Pax's voices. They're both distinct from one another, and you get a real feel for who these characters are, and you gain a real understanding of their bond and their relationship and how much they love and need each other, how much they miss each other, and honestly, it's just harrowing. That's what it is. I feel like this story really explores the inevitability of change and also growing pains. A lot of times when you talk about change, it's neatly divided between the before and the after, and typically you only see the results of that change. But this book puts you through the ringer and forces you to feel all of those awful in-between growing pains moments. It makes you confront change and realize that change is terrifying, it's scary, it's awful, it doesn't always bring good or happy things, but it's gonna come for all of us eventually. I'm not exaggerating when I say this book is like the saddest thing ever, and there really is nothing but sadness in store for you if you read this book, but it was amazing, it was powerful, it was poignant as hell, and I loved it, so I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I feel like I talked a lot today, but it was worth it, and those were all the books I read in May. In the comments down below, I would love to hear from you if you have read any of the books I mentioned in this video, or you would like to read them in the future, or I would love to know what is your favorite thing that you've read lately. But that is everything I have for this wrap-up video today. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!